About 750 years or so before tonight's gospel passage, there was a man that walked the earth who lived near the town of Jerusalem in the southern kingdom of Judah, who was called by God in his own day for a very important task that he said yes to. And in the midst of his life, giving that over to the service of God, he became the most prolific writer of all of the Old Testament prophets. And he lived in a very crucial time in the history of Israel, which was the second half of the 7th century BC, which was the time when the northern kingdom was falling at the hands of the Assyrians, shortly before the southern kingdom of Judah, where he lived, would fall about 50 years, 80 years after him. His name was Isaiah, and we know him through the many verses and chapters of his book, which is the largest book of the Old Testament prophetic literature. One of the prophecies he wrote was during the time of King Ahaz. And King Ahaz was in power about the time that his confreres to the north were being invaded, and he was seeking refuge and protection. And during that time that King Ahaz was king of Judah, Isaiah, the prophet, received many prophecies from God that were written in his book. Many of them, especially, were prophecies of the Emmanuel. And among those prophecies, Isaiah wrote these words: "The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Upon those who dwelt in the land of gloom, a light has shone. You have brought them abundant joy and great rejoicing, as they rejoice before you as at the harvest, as men who make merry when dividing spoils. For the yoke that burdened them, the pole on their shoulder, and the rod of their taskmaster you have smashed, as on the day of Midian. For every boot that tramped in battle, every cloak rolled in blood will be burned as fuel for flames. For a child is born to us, a son is given us. Upon his shoulder dominion rests. They name him Wonder Counselor, God Hero, Father forever, Prince of Peace. His dominion is vast and forever peaceful, from David's throne and over his kingdom, which he confirms and sustains by judgment and justice, both now and forever." Imagine those words as they were heard in his own day, amidst the turmoil of war that was happening just to the neighbors in the north, some of whose own kings were threatening the sovereignty of Ahaz's reign. Ahaz was not very faithful to God, and he sought the protection of Assyria to save him, but the peace would be temporary, because in the days of his son Hezekiah, Judah also would fall. But in the midst of all of that are these words, these prophetic utterances, that one would be born whose kingdom would be vast and forever peaceful, that one from David's throne would confirm and sustain a peaceful kingdom by judgment and justice forever, forever. And he would be given a name for such a feat. They would call him Wonder Counselor, God Hero, Father forever, and Prince of Peace. That last title, Prince of Peace, is one that is more well known to us, that we sort of especially hear during the Advent season and Christmas season, that Jesus came truly when the child was born to us, when the Son was given to us. He was called Prince of Peace. Now, Jesus was called Prince of Peace not because it was a fancy title that was predicted of him, that was prophesied of him. He was called Prince of Peace because he would truly be the one to make it. He would be the one who made peace. Not simply a temporary peace, but a peace that would last for now and for all ages. And if we want to understand how is it that Jesus received rightly this title, Prince of Peace, we have to look no further than the very sacrament which he instituted and which we commemorate this night at the feast of the Lord's Supper. Jesus in instituting the holy sacrament of the Eucharist, initiates and institutes the very covenant of peace that he will make with mankind. It is in the gift of his body and blood, his soul and divinity, that Jesus is truly called this title, Prince of Peace. Because it is with the human race that he comes to make peace. He comes to make peace with a human race that was lost for ages in the midst of strife and war, in the midst of unfaithfulness and inability to be holy, to do what was right, instead of being self-seeking and self-serving. Through all of the ages, up until that moment, from the time of the fall, God looked down from heaven to earth with his heart aching for the peace of mankind. And God knew in his own divine heart that the only way that mankind would ever find peace is if God himself would be the one to make it on behalf of the ones that he loved. And in the gift of this holy sacrament, Jesus makes that peace. And how does he do it? Jesus makes that peace by giving himself to us in the form and the symbol of bread and wine, the most common elements to be found of food and drink in his time and through all ages. And he describes for us, he shows for us what that peace really looks like. Because the peace that the world seeks, the peace that the world hopes for, oftentimes doesn't really extend beyond the absence of war. We say that we are a world at peace if there's no war. But God knows, and human experience tells us, that peace is not simply the absence of war. Peace is what we experience as a special kind of harmony when there is order. This is what peace is. When Jesus is called Prince of Peace, Jesus doesn't say, I come to make the absence of war. Jesus says, I come to bring the special kind of harmony that results from order, right order. God constituted the entire universe in order. He made all things according to their order. This is what the book of Genesis tells us, and is what makes the Christian religion, the Jewish religion, distinct from every other religion and every other creation story out there, from which the universe was made out of chaos. But not so in our tradition. God did not create out of chaos. God created out of the order that was from within himself. And what destroyed that order was the sin and the rejection of God's love committed by the angel, Lucifer, and his co-angels that went with him, and of the sin of Adam and Eve, and so therefore the breakdown of the entire human race that plunged us into chaos. And in the midst of that chaos, God comes to undo and to reorder what was in turmoil. And so tonight, when we celebrate the Lord's Supper, it is this great and awesome mystery which brings peace to mankind, a kind of peace that was prophesied to be eternal, vast, brought about by the one who was born to us, by the Son that was given us, who would show us how it would be done. And so for us to be partakers of the peace, the only kind of peace which can be eternal peace, we have to make ourselves available to the memory, the commemoration, the representation of this very sacrament. And in order to do so, Jesus didn't just have one supper with his own apostles. He instituted as well those apostles as the ones who would themselves, in their own turn, recommemorate, represent for all the ages thereafter the gift of peace to mankind. Do you ever wonder why the priesthood is called the sacrament of holy order? This is the reason why the priest receives the sacrament of holy order, because it is his task in a special way to bring order back to a world which is in the midst of chaos. And the way by which the priest brings supernatural order into a world of chaos is to perpetuate the holy sacrifice by which peace is truly obtained. The peace which Jesus invites all of us to become partakers of. And in the very midst of that supper, Jesus shows not only by his word, but also by the example, just like we heard just now in the 13th chapter of John's Gospel, that a part of what it means to bring peace into the world is not simply to receive this holy sacrament, which we must if we are to be true peacemakers in the way that Jesus is the peacemaker, because this is the only one in whom peace can be truly found. To receive Jesus in the Eucharist is to receive the very means of peace by which we can distribute God's dominion into the world. God's reconciliation with the human race. And having received Jesus in the Holy Eucharist, we are called, as Jesus said, to live the life that he has modeled for us. That after we receive Holy Communion, our life's mission includes acting, being, choosing, speaking, thinking, living the very way that Jesus gave to us as his example. It is so fascinating that at the beginning of this gospel passage, John says that Jesus loved his own. He loved them to the very end. It also says that God his Father had put everything into his power. Jesus enters this very night with the power of the universe in his hands. And with all of that power, Jesus chooses to bring peace to the world by loving those who were his own to the end. And he shows us that loving his own to the end looks a whole lot like kneeling down before each of them and washing their feet, which in his day, as you may know, was a task that was only given to the lowest of all slaves, the lowest of all servants. Jesus raised up humanity to peace by placing himself underneath them, by giving them the gift of his own life, so that their hearts could finally have what they wanted more than anything else, the order that they were created to live in. Our hearts are reordered from chaos into peace when we receive Holy Communion with great faith and with great humility. And in so doing, we become, like Jesus, in a way, participators in his all-powerful dominion. We, in turn, gain the power to bring peace to the world, which we will do by living as Christ lived, by serving as Christ served. And it is in this respect, most especially, that we are to really consider our lives. Because what kind of power has been handed over to you? Think of this. Think about your life. What kind of power has God handed over to you? In one respect, the same kind of power that he handed over to Jesus, which was the gift of a single life. The power that God has given to you is the power of a single life and the freedom to choose with it whatever you will. And if you choose with the single life that you have, you can become a co-heir in the everlasting dominion of peace through a gift of faith and holy reception of the body and blood of our Lord Jesus, and in the living of the life that he lived, which he proved was more powerful than the war, than the chaos, than the sin, than the suffering that all of the world could muster against him. He was greater than those because his Father had put everything into his power. And Jesus says in the midst of this dinner, "Peace is what I leave to you. Peace is my gift to you. Not as the world gives do I give it to you." He says, I have told you this so that you might have peace in me. In the world you will have trouble, but take courage, for I have conquered the world. What an amazing sacrament we get to celebrate tonight. What an amazing commemoration each year at the beginning of this Holy Triduum, that we get to recall not only what Jesus did for us then, but what Jesus continues to do for us through all the ages. And we don't have to do this simply as onlookers, as ones who say, wow, good job, Jesus. We also get to be ones who are caught up into it and, like Jesus, become powerful like he is powerful. He who is the Prince of Peace. We also can become peacemakers if peace is to be found here in the right ordering of our hearts. The right ordering which is brought about literally by the ingestion of the God of the universe, who promises that when you receive Holy Communion in faith, it isn't just your body that is nourished, it is your soul that is renewed and made well. So, the question tonight remains. You have the power of a single life. How shall you use it?